Let's talk a little bit about that. Teacher quality. We insist that our teachers be highly qualified. We insist that they take professional development. We insist that they relicense. We insist that they fulfill professional development obligations. They're going to be taking retail 45 hours of additional training to work with ELL students, which is absolutely necessary to help them move forward, at least to work with these youngsters. But if you're in a charter school, you don't have all these things. Maybe you have to take retail next year, but you don't have to do the same kind of professional development. We've looked at statistics. Some of them, have 30% of their faculty as being highly qualified or meeting the requirements of the state. There's a very high turnover rate. There's burnout. I get teachers coming to me all the time from charter schools saying, I need to get a real job and get away from the burnout. In Mystic Valley, they're scripted teachers. They read from a script. They read from a script. That's called direct instruction. Since when is teaching direct instruction? It's an art and a science. Anyone who knows good teaching knows that teachers have to be able to relate to students and do much more than read from a script. But I think one of the most important things that Alan pointed out, and I think it's critical to all of us, is the concept of sustained learning. Just because a youngster does well at MCAS, and by the way, the state's trying to replace MCAS with PARC, and that'll be very interesting. I'll give you a comment on that in a minute. The evidence is not good. Because when you look at it, at many of these charters, the matched charter school, which was number one, okay, on the MCAS and ELA, but they're 274th on the SAT. They're number one in math on the MCAS, but they're 230 on the SAT in these areas. Is it test prep or real learning? We don't educate kids to pass MCAS. We educate kids to be able to apply their learning to the real world, to go out to the marketplace, to go into society and be contributors. There are 17 community charters with state average low income. Only 2 of them made it to the top half of the SATs. Only 2. It's from Alan's statistics and from the stuff that he's collected. The Boston Foundation put out a report on college completion data, 6-year completion data. It's the same as the Boston Public Schools. It's not different. So if they're not completing college any faster, where is the sustained learning? Where is the added value? If we're going to invest in charter schools, let's get added value. Okay. The programs are overly structured. When youngsters go into the real world, they've got to be able to function in ways that allow them to make decisions on their own and not have someone tell them do this, do that at this particular point in time. So I guess what I want to do is I want to lead into the next discussion with this. Is there are several things. What is the best investment? So let's ask some real questions. Maybe we should be investing charter school money in early childhood education, because really the achievement gap is never going to be closed unless we deal with the preparation gap. Youngsters who come to school from the suburban communities with 1,000 words are going to do much better than youngsters who come to school with 300 words, because they don't have the benefits of early childhood. We're in a vocational education program. It's underfunded in the Commonwealth. Vocational education, trade education, it has a place. Health and nutrition, mentorships, ELL, SPED. The circuit breaker, like I said, is going to be $15 million below its actual need. And going back to some of the comments previously, and I'll try to wrap up on this, is that we need to deal with the whole child. We're teaching people to make a transition to adulthood, not just to be academics. Because in our society, if a society, I'll take, quote, John Gardner, and then I'll stop at this particular point. He said, if a society doesn't value its plumbers the same way it values its philosophers, it'll neither have pipes or ideas that hold any water.
Good afternoon. I'm Siobhan Roberts. I'm a parent.
Louder.
Siobhan Roberts, a parent in the Boston Public School and an early educator, as Barbara Field stated. And I'd first like to piggyback off of Dr. Cook, who said I too I don't have enough time to tell you, having 7 children and the experience of Boston Public School and a charter school, the things that have happened to my 7 children. So I'd like to start with, she mentioned that political, social, and racial was really, as well as the college prep in the charter school. So So with my children, I know I have one that the charter school failed socially, and he's presently in the Marines. He moved forward in the Marines. He did not go to college. He suffered from dealing with being an African-American male in the charter school system and dealing with his identity. He was often suspended from school based on his belt being tight, his shirt being tucked in. Academically, his grade point average was great, but he had a little demerit sheet that he had to walk around with and come home and say, Mom, I got a demerit because I told the principal that his tie looked nice. Can't talk in line. So some of these things, what are we doing? Are we creating children and ushering them in for their educational system? Are we doing this to have them be able to stand up straight and be a soldier? So he went to the Marines. And with that, he also was able to be successful, and I'm going to just try to really be quickly, because he ended up connecting with a Caucasian family and sort of modeling that parent and coming home and saying, well, Mom, this is what they're doing there. And I said, well, son, I'm your mother. And in this household, one, we're going to serve the Lord. And secondly, this is how you're going to be educated. You're going to do your work, and you're going to do it this way. So he began to take on a different culture, which is how he was able to get through that charter school. Another thing I like to address, which is African American males, because 7 out of 7 children, all of them went through the charter school. One of my sons, after 5 of them came out of the school, he ended up being expelled from the school, which is my youngest son, because he had an IEP plan that they could not service. They said to me, after being on the board of this school, all of those years with all the children, which I felt special, right? Hey, all my kids came out here. No, we can't service him because of this reason, that reason. It was not about a child that had a disability in a wheelchair, because I like to address that. We talked about different disabilities. A disability that you can see, a child in a wheelchair, yeah, I've seen them in the charter schools. No disrespect, absolutely. But a disability that a child that had a behavior, you can't see the disability, tell the child in a wheelchair to get up and run. Can we do that? No, he can't get up and run with his legs. But a child that has a disability, that's behavior. They're clear to tell my African American son, hey, why are you moving around? We can't service you. No. Secondly, he was played out of the school, and he was put to be at home. And where did we get the educators to educate him for that short time? Boston Public Schools, thank you very much. They went to your department and said, oh, this is where you have to get someone to service them while he's out of school. Not the charter school, who I keep hearing all this money is synced into the school. Then as a parent, this is the first time I actually sat here and said, wow, but they went to Boston Public School special ed to get that person to come service my child. Now, I'd just like to tell you shortly, so you know, it doesn't sound like he was this problem child. No, he ended up at home because this was only 5th grade, and my son was so stressed with the point of tightening your belt, tucking your shirt, and all these things, that they called what's called the best team, because he was in the bathroom stressed out with trying to walk around with a demerit sheet, that I made a choice to remove him. I would have fought to the end with my last child in your charter system. I chose to say no. Son, you do not have to be stressed out with that. But what I will do is speak at a forum like this against another child having to deal with that. So, yes, they removed him out of the school because they said that they could not service that child. And closing, because I know time is of the essence, you talked about teachers and being dedicated to hard work in the charter schools. And yes, I've seen them there at night, and they say, okay, you can come and you can stay after, and all those things. And so with that, yes, they do, the charter schools do help all students. They are great with that. And they help them by moving them out of their schools and put them in the public schools. And secondly, I like to address, I'm sorry, the other point I'd like to make is it says that the charters are doing the best job at substantially separate classes. And I'm saying that. Yes, they are, because they are substantially separating them and sending them back to Boston Public Schools.
Good morning. My name is Bernice Funches, and I'm a parent. I have have 6 children, and I have 25 grandchildren. I'm excited to be here this morning. My youngest son, David Johnson, went to public and charter school. From grades 1 through 5, my son David was at a public school, and he did well. He was on grade level. We heard about Roxbury Preparatory Charter School. We were very excited because I wanted him to get a better education than the rest of my children. He was the first child to go to a charter school. And so we were praying that he got into the school, and we were so excited. And he was excited at first. David had never been suspended. He had never gotten in trouble in school. He was a very fun-loving child and silly. He was just silly. So David's first year at Roxbury Preparatory Charter School was kind of a struggle. He got demerits for laughing, for being fun-loving, for not remembering his tie, for not tucking in his shirt. He got suspended for laughing on the school bus on the way to school. He got kept back in the 6th grade. They said that he wasn't able to pass, so I allowed them to keep him back. So he did the 6th grade twice, and then he went on to the 7th grade, struggling. He didn't stay after for extra help. He stayed after for demerits. In the 7th grade, they talked to me at the end of the year saying that he was going to have to repeat the 7th grade. So that's 3 years in middle school, and he should be graduating. He started feeling bad about himself. So I made a decision to take him out, and I put him in the Boston Pilot Charter School. When he went there, he was bored because of the stuff that he was doing in the 6th grade, they were doing in the 8th grade. So he played around his whole 8th grade year and had to go to summer school. He went through summer school and passed with A's. Then I put him in Codman Square, the Codman Academy High School. His first semester he did well, then he started struggling. They were talking about expelling him, so I took him out. I put him back in Boston Public School. He was bored. He cut school. He ended up dropping out. He took his GED, and he did get accepted to Berkeley School of Music. He is a functional adult, working. He is a father, and he is doing well.
All right.
Good morning. First, I'd like to commend you all for being here this morning. And I am a BPS parent. I am a very proud BPS parent.
Louder, Karen.
What? I'm not loud enough? Seriously? All right. Anyway, so I am a very proud BPS parent. I am a former BPS student. And I have my 2 lovely daughters that are still in BPS schools. They're here today. And let me be clear. BPS did not always do a great job. My older son, they didn't do as great as they could have, but I'm very proud of the work that BPS has done with me as a parent to get these kids to where they are now. But at one point, because my children they're extremely intelligent, they were being, wooed by the charter school systems, and I went and looked at several of them. And actually, one of my daughters, who was not identified as having any special needs at that point, I was in the process of getting her evaluated, and I told them that. And that's all I did. I told them she might have some minimal special needs services that she might need for organization and executive functioning. I was told not to bother putting my application in. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, besides that, that's fine. As an advocate, there was a part of me that wanted to fight that, but I really consider that if you don't want my child, you don't deserve my child. So the things that I thought about after that, because I've seen the impact since then, because I started paying attention to what was going on. My nephew, much like your son, repeated 7th grade because he was suspended 47 days in the 7th grade at the charter school right next to my house. The next year he got promoted because he was only suspended 24 days. He was suspended for forgetting homework. He forgot his homework because he is a child who was on an IEP that the charter school took him off of. So they would not accommodate small accommodations for him. Now, as the proud Irving mom that I am, I sit on the school site council for the past 5 years. For 5 years, our school has continued to get cuts every single year at budget time. That's fine. Let me tell you something. We had to cut an applied science program that had animal studies, engineering for 6th through 8th graders at a time when everybody is touting that STEM is important. Now, we've had to cut other programming. We've had to cut positions. At the same time that we're cutting these positions, I have just in the past month, and this is my data that I was able to get from somebody that I'm not going to name, but we have had 30 students, 30 students, come into the Irving from charter schools, returned back to us amazingly right before MCAS season. And these are students that probably have special needs, most of them unidentified. So now my school has to go through the process of doing that. That's an additional cost to the district also. Now, as a blogger, I wanted to know, because we keep arguing with the pro-charter people, how much does BPS allocate for a student? So I went and dug into the wonderful BPS budget, which if any of you have ever looked at it, it is not a fun thing to read. I dug down deep, and I just want to give you what the actual per pupil allocation is for our BPS students. For the lowest grade, and they do it by grade level first, so this is your base before your child is assessed any kind of anything for advanced work class or special needs, regardless. This is your starting rate. $4,981 for students who are in grades 9 through 12, 3 through 5. For students in 1st and 2nd and 6th through 8, it is $5,364. This is for a year. For the K0, K1, it is $6,897 for a year. Now, if your child has significant, any kind of special needs, whether it's minimal, significant, whatever, or ELL needs, or is a high-risk student, poverty, there are certain things that tie into it, you will get more dollars for that student. But generally, you're talking maybe $7,000 per student tops if your child has a mild disability or a mild ELL need. Because ELL students are only assessed like $70 per year to $2,000 and some odd dollars. And I'd have to look up the exact figures. But that's what a school gets to educate that child. So then I looked at how much, and I went to the Mass Department of Ed and dug through all their data and went through every form until I got the exact numbers. We have over 7,000 students in BPS being transported to charter schools throughout the Commonwealth. We have one student being transported to Plymouth every day to go to school at a charter school there. Why, I don't know. We pay between $12,000 and $15,000 per pupil allocation. That's not the facilities cost, that's not the transportation cost. That is their base per pupil amount. So I look at the impact on the schools, and let me be very clear. Charter schools have a place in the ecosystem that is our educational world. But until we insist that our elected officials make it a point to start holding them accountable, or we reform MIRA from 1993, which I really want to see us do, we should not be paying for it out of our Boston Public Schools budget, or Lawrence, or Lynn, or anywhere else. So I would suggest that all of you here today, whether you're pro-charter, or pro-public school, or pro-private school, and don't get me wrong, I've seen similar issues in private schools, and in our Boston public schools. But the funding isn't there. So I'm asking people to speak up on that and come to our Boston State meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Charlie Gallo. I'm a proud member of the Lynn School Committee, serving my second term, and as of this week became a candidate for state representative in the 11th Essex District. How many people here are AFT members? Any MTA members here? Okay. Well, welcome. I'm an MTA member as well. I'm happy to be here with you. And welcome parents and everyone from Citizens for Public Schools. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my school district in Lynn. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the charter schools that we have now, the charter schools that may come to Lynn, and I'm going to talk about how the Lynn School Committee reacted with respect to those charter schools, and a nice tie-in, I think, to what Karen said, that elected officials can do something when it comes to charter schools being expanded in their cities. The Lynn Schools serves 15,000 students. We have a $118 million school budget. In some buildings, there are 30 languages spoken. We have about 54% English as a second language students. 82% of our students are low income, and these are challenges, but they're also strengths. It makes for a rich educational experience in our schools and a rich social experience as well. We have a total of 26 schools, and has anyone here gone to their town or city's Thanksgiving, day before Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving football game? Everyone has, right? We have so many high schools in Lynn that rather than playing against the neighboring town, our high schools compete against each other. So that's the type of district we have. We're a true urban district. And it's a great district. We were in level 4 status until last year, and it's due to the good work of our educators, our parents, and our students that we are out of level 4 status. 26 schools, and not a single one is labeled by the state fail. Consistently, we're first or second in terms of math and English scores as compared to the other urban districts. And we can get into the numbers, but what I like to do is walk through the schools and see what's going on. And when you do that, you see the students learning, you see the teachers teaching, and I'm always proud when I walk into a Lynn public school. And yet, charters. So, we currently have KIPP Academy in Lynn, and that services about 850 students, grades 5 through 12. And KIPP, as a result of KIPP, Lynn loses $8 million in Chapter 70 funding each year. In addition to that, it's about tax time. Has anyone done their tax returns yet? No, me either. If you do your tax returns, and if you've made a charitable contribution, what happens? Get a deduction, right? So KIPP and any other charter school is set up as a nonprofit, as a charity, so that they can take contributions and get a tax deduction. And the giver can get a tax deduction. The donor can get a tax deduction. We can't do that in the Lynn Public Schools. We can't do that in the Boston Public Schools. Yet there's no legislative mechanism to claw back those funds. The charters are able to get, the public schools are not. So we have KIPP, 850 students, grades 5 through 8. They've petitioned to expand to service lower grades. And we also have a new charter, Phoenix Charter School, which would be about 350, 400 students, I believe grades 5 through 9. Now, I told you all these great things about the Lynn Public Schools district. We are opening and reopening schools. We are hiring teachers, not firing them, even in light of this money being taken from us. And I think what we're being asked to do, and what our teachers are being asked to do, and our parents and students are being asked to do, is to do more with less. And that happens every single time that a charter school application is approved. And so what do you do about it? On the Lynn School Committee, late in December, we unanimously passed a resolution opposing charter schools, the expansion or establishment of charter schools in the city of Lynn, because of the funding required to establish them so detrimentally impacts our district. Because they do not service English language learners or special education students as we do in the public schools. Because their teachers and paraprofessionals don't have to attain the same certification and standards that ours do, and they also don't enjoy the collective bargaining rights that they get in the public school. And you know, I toured KIPP Academy recently. After we passed this resolution, I was asked to go visit KIPP, and I said, sure. Their teachers have to have their cell phones on until 9 p.m. every night. How much do they get paid? No one could tell me because the contracts are individually negotiated. So there's a lot of problems there. And so the Lynn School Committee went on record and resolved to oppose the establishment or expansion of charter schools in Lynn. We submitted our resolution to the Commonwealth. There was also a write-up in the Globe North about it. And I think from a local point of view, it's a step in the right direction. I wish other school committees would do the same. Just one last point. One last point, if I could. When I did visit the charter school, one of the staffers there asked me, said, how can we better work together? And I said, you can give us some of the money back. She laughed. But in all seriousness, what I said to her after that comment is that we've got to stop with the vitriol from the charter school side, saying, I saved your children. You didn't save the children. You're offering a different type of education. But to use that type of language, I think, really pollutes the debate. What we've got to talk about is facts and figures and move forward in that way. I think that's what's in the best interest for our students. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi there, I'm Barrett Smith. Can everybody hear me? Good. All right. So I worked, started this fall as a Match Corps member, and I want to kind of dig into a little bit of what that means, and I also want to talk a little bit about the disciplinary system, given what we've heard so far today, just to kind of lay out a specific system for everyone. As a Corps member, we kind of run the school. I worked as a tutor for 10th, 6th, and 8th grade students. I was also a teaching assistant. I also distributed school lunches. And at times I was kind of an ad hoc janitor, just like everybody else in the school. Kind of a really frustratingly comical moment then was when the staff bathroom was out of toilet paper, and I spent about 20 minutes wandering around supply closets in the school trying to find it. It's kind of a silly moment. So as Corps members, you know, we all function as tutors, teachers, teaching assistants, administrative assistants, lunch personnel, janitors, coaches, one-on-one aides, and more. We do this as volunteers with the contract we signed. We were switched this year without our knowledge to being employees, and we were switched to minimum wage employees. And with that switch, we were being paid $8 an hour for 40-hour weeks while we were working 60 or 70-hour weeks. If you want to know a little bit more about that, there's a fantastic investigatory piece written up by the Boston Globe. But since time is limited, I want to move on and speak a little bit about the no excuses discipline system that's in place at Match. So Siobhan mentioned the demerit system, and that's something that students have. Students are tracked with a merit and demerit system. And the first thing to clarify is demerits aren't given or issued. They're earned by the student. And this is, you know, the first lesson when you learn to give demerits to students. You don't give them, they earn them. Students earn merits by embodying Match's values, which are courage, perseverance, and responsibility. And students earn demerits for various infractions, the most common falling under the broad category of unprofessional behavior, but many of them having to do with dress code violations, like forgetting a belt, forgetting to tuck in your shirt, or having a polo without the Match logo on it. In this system, silence is very highly valued and pervasive. Noise levels are categorized, so level 0 is absolute silence. It's no noise making of any kind. And all transitions, including the first and last 5 minutes of class, and hallway movements, and some of communal breakfast, they all happen at level 0. During the designated level 0s, students earn demerits for any noise making, and that's talking, whispering, greeting, including, principals or administrators, and even laughing, as was already brought up. So it's a common thread throughout these schools that I've seen. So in the system with these kind of expectations, teachers, tutors, and administrators this year at Match Middle School have issued more than 41,000 demerits to 250 students. There are different levels for different infractions. Tier A is the kind of thing like talking in the hallway or having your shirt untucked. One particular student has earned 630 Tier A's so far this year. Tier A demerits so far this year. The other one is more serious and comes with a lunch detention. They don't accumulate, so if you get more than one Tier B, or lunch detention merit per day, they don't stack up and you're not just a lunch detention forever. But one student has earned 240 Tier B demerits so far this year. And all of these numbers, all this onslaught of the merit and demerit system, it made me ask the question, how effective is this system? Because I think that there are certainly students that can come into these charter schools, and a lot of them kind of fly under the radar and aren't subjected as harshly because they can kind of fit in with the system. But this system doesn't work for a lot of students, and those are the students that I was concerned with. It's the 20% of the student body that's routinely in Friday detentions at Match, where you're in the lunchroom and you're sitting, staring at a wall, sitting in slant, with your arms crossed, silent, with nothing in front of you, no schoolwork, no reading, sitting silent for 2 hours on Friday afternoons. And I think the point, going back to the students who are frequently among that 20% of the student body there, students become frequent flyers. And that system starts to kind of enforce these social and self-perceptions of students as either good kids or bad kids. And I don't think that's the purpose of our schools, is to teach students that they're bad kids, or teach or perpetuate any kind of self-identification with being a bad kid and being subject to that. I also want to take a minute to point out, I want to echo Daniela in her presentation, because I do think that this is a very highly racialized system as well. And I think that's important to recognize, is what type of students are we told need a no excuses discipline model, and what type of students do not need that model. Finally, I want to speak very briefly about the strength of relationships that tutors do develop with their students, because it's a beautiful thing. Tutors are often just very fierce advocates for their students within Match, and that's powerful to have someone that's there throughout the school day, that intimately, gets to know the kids and can advocate very strongly for their students. And I think that has to be kind of a basis of any kind of transformative education, is that kind of love and advocacy. But I think that alone is not sufficient. You need systems that work that way to advocate for students. You need systems that promote a student's self-esteem and sense of self-worth. To quote a friend and another tutor who actually left Match this year, I believe in education and I want to be involved in it, but I also believe that all social issues are interconnected. And just as these social issues are interconnected, our solutions have to be thorough and holistic and multifaceted. We have to seek to educate our students holistically. We cannot socially stifle them in constant expectations of silence. We cannot teach them to think of themselves as bad kids or their achievement as standardized test scores. We cannot neglect arts, science, history, languages, and more just to raise MCAS test scores. We can't run a school without community control or accountability, and we cannot educate by employing structures of silence or exploitation. All social issues are interconnected, and our solutions will be too. Holistic education, living wages, and the heartbeat of a liberatory education and social change, community power, and community voice.
Hello, my name is Jim Blatchford. I'm the school vice chair of the Lawrence School Committee. If I'm not speaking loud enough, just yell, please. Thank you. Again, my name is Jim Blatchford, vice chair of the Lawrence School Committee. Lawrence has a long history of interesting education, let's put it that way. In 2009, we had a new mayor elected, William Lantigua. He was a state representative for most of the city of Lawrence. He then decided to fire our current superintendent, who was later indicted and then put into jail for a bit, mainly for embezzling money and using school funds for his personal gain. So we then, for 2 years, from 2010 to beginning of 2012, did not have a superintendent. We decided to keep our assistant superintendent as essentially running the school system. Our other assistant superintendent decided to retire at the beginning of the 2010 year, January 2010. So she not only had no assistant superintendent to assist her, she now had no superintendent. So Mary Lou Bergeron is her name, she's a saint. She kept our school in excellent financial shape. We had one of the best books, as it were. Our grades, on the other hand, did slip. We never had a level 4 school in Lawrence until, I believe, her last year as superintendent or acting superintendent. We got 2 level 4 schools. We were a level 4 district, but we only had 2 level 4 schools. 1 year later, I ran for election in 2011. Brand new majority on the school committee was voted in because we were kind of sick and tired of not having a superintendent. And so come a month later or so, we were taken over by the state of Massachusetts as the only district to be labeled as a level 5 chronically underperforming school district. My district is also 95% Latino, just so you know. My city is 70% Latino, voting base wise, 30% white. The school district is 95% Latino. We, as the Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education, like to say, we're an experiment because this has never happened before in the state of Massachusetts. This was ed reform passed, I believe, 2010. The representatives can correct me, that allowed for a level 5 school district. It was a vote by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education that put us in this situation. We then had our receiver appointed, who cares so much about public schools, as he says. He brought in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 charter schools to administrate our public schools. Now, these schools are still public schools. Every single teacher is unionized by the Lawrence Teachers Union. They can't kick any kids out, supposedly, but as you saw as the earlier slide, Up Academy in Lawrence is a middle school, 5 through 8, that has one of the highest suspension rates. That being said, Up Academy was given a second school in Lawrence. So now they run the former Leonard School and now the Oliver Middle School. Demerits at the Oliver Middle School, Leonard Middle School. One of the kids actually was talking to me, and when we say our kids are kids, we don't think of them having higher thoughts about their education, or they're just there to learn. We're just there to teach them. These kids know that they're being fairly untreated by these teachers, that they're being given these demerits for things like this in the middle of class. And so that was his last demerit, and he was suspended from the school. It's astounding to me that when a fidgety child in Lawrence Public Schools, couldn't sit still, I would have been kicked out of a Lawrence Public School, essentially, and thrown into a different school. That being said, we do have a charter school in Lawrence, which I think is fascinating. It's called Phoenix Academy. It's originally from Chelsea, I believe. They are not your average charter school. They're a high school. They do not take kids by lottery. They take kids that have either dropped out of school, or as the district labels them, chronically underperforming. They use that term a lot. They label these kids and they put them, so instead of going to the regular high school, or 6 regular high schools that we have now when we only have 1, because the small school concept is very interesting to people, they now move them to the Phoenix Academy, or the kids who didn't complete their education are brought back into the system, which I think is excellent, because that has never happened in Lawrence before. So when a kid leaves public school at 16, because that's the legal age you can drop out, they decided to bring them back. Not a lot of kids. I believe there was like 30 the first year. It's increased since then. So this program I agree with is that labeling these kids and then sticking them, instead of going to regular high school, they're getting automatically stuck into Phoenix Academy. That's the part I agree with bringing the kids back. We did have match tutors here not here, but in Lawrence. These people are paid between $10,000 to $15,000 a year to be full-time tutors, essentially, at Lawrence Public Schools. Don't worry, they're younger or older. That was the reason why they aren't paid so well. They're either retired teachers who need money, or they're kids right out of college who need money. So that's why it's okay. We do have, like I said, 2 academies. Spark Academy is another one that runs a more exercise-oriented school at the South Lawrence East. There's also Community Day Charter, which is a Lawrence-based charter school, which actually, like I said, 95% of our kids in Lawrence Public Schools are Latino. And so this school, by definition, has to have higher ELL kids. So they are dealing with it, I'm sure, a lot better than some of the Boston Public Charter, well, not Boston Public, but Boston Charter schools, purely because they have to deal with it. So it's interesting that they're now administrative. Finally, we do have one gleaming ray of hope that I like to point out. Brian knows about this intricately. It's the Oliver Partnership School, which is the Oliver Elementary K-5. It's a partnership between AFT and Lawrence Public Schools, where instead of having a principal, in the medical field you have doctors who become heads of departments, essentially. So they practice and they get to run the department. We have teachers now, 2 teachers, co-principals as it were, that are now running Oliver Elementary Partnership School. So it's an interesting experiment, and usually that one I'm looking forward to seeing what the actual results are, because now you have teachers who are in charge of the school, running the school. You have a national union who wants the school to succeed, so the resources are there for the teacher training, for the actual investment in education by teachers, because this now says you have some skin in the game. You're running this school, and truthfully, I think it's a model, if it succeeds, I think can really expand past just Lawrence, and can be an answer to charter schools, saying teachers know what they're doing, and if you give them the opportunity, they know how to run a school. So, that being said.
time. And I want to again thank the panelists, your insight, the experiences that you shared for us, certainly food for thought as we move into the next session. Because of time, I'm going to turn it over to Paula, but thank you.
So I'm Paula Parnagian. I'm on the board of Citizens for Public Schools. I was past president of Citizens for Public Schools, and I'm a proud graduate of Lawrence High School.